October 27th, 1962, 11 p.m. You are 91 meters underwater. The Atlantic Ocean presses against the hull from every direction. A cold, absolute darkness that feels less like water and more like the weight of the world itself. Inside Soviet submarine B-59, the temperature has reached 60 degrees Celsius. The air conditioning failed 3 days ago. Men are fainting at their stations. The carbon dioxide is so thick you can taste it. Metallic, suffocating. The flavor of a sealed room running out of future. The depth charges are getting closer. Each explosion sends a shockwave through the hull that rattles your teeth and your thoughts and your understanding of whether you will see tomorrow. The Americans have been hunting you for hours, and you have had no contact with Moscow for 4 days. You do not know if the war has already started. Captain Savitsky has made his decision. The nuclear torpedo is armed. 2 officers have already said yes. There is 1 man left. His name is Vasili Arkhipov. He is 36 years old, a peasant's son from a small town near Moscow, a quiet man. His wife will later describe him as intelligent, polite, and very calm. In this moment, calm is the most dangerous thing in the world. Because if Vasili Arkhipov says yes, the torpedo fires. The USS Randolph is destroyed. America responds. Moscow responds. And the chain of events that follows kills hundreds of millions of people. He says one word: no. And you are alive today because of it. Staraya Kupovna, Russia, 1926. The town sits on the eastern edge of Moscow Oblast. Small, flat, unremarkable. The kind of place that produces farmers and factory workers and men who understand that life is built from the ground up, with your hands, without complaint. Vasili Alexandrovich Arkhipov is born here on January 30th into a family that has never owned anything except the labor of their own bodies. His father, Alexander, works the land. His mother, Maria, raises children the way the Russian countryside raises everything, with patience, with endurance, with the quiet understanding that difficulty is not an exception, it is the condition. Vasili is not remarkable as a boy. He is not loud. He does not draw attention to himself. He reads, he thinks, he listens more than he speaks, a habit that will one day save the world, though nobody in Staraya Kupovna could have imagined such a thing. At 16, he enrolls in the Pacific Higher Naval School in Vladivostok. The year is 1942. The Great Patriotic War is consuming everything around him: men, resources, certainty. But Vasili Arkhipov moves through the chaos with the same stillness that will define him for the rest of his life. In August 1945, still a student, he serves his first active duty aboard a minesweeper during the Soviet-Japanese War. The job is exactly what it sounds like: finding things designed to kill you before they do. It requires patience, precision, the ability to work in conditions where a single mistake ends everything. Vasili Arkhipov is very good at it. He graduates in 1947. He is assigned to the submarine service, Black Sea Fleet, Northern Fleet, Baltic Fleet. He moves through the ranks with the unhurried competence of a man who has never needed to announce himself. Not fast, not slow, just steady. The kind of steady that the Soviet Navy notices and rewards with increasing responsibility and increasing silence. He marries Olga. They have a daughter, Yelena. He does not talk about his work at home. Not because he is distant. Olga will speak of him for the rest of her life as a man of extraordinary warmth and intelligence. But because the work is secret, and the secret is heavy, and when you come home from submarines you want to leave the darkness at the dock. By 1961, Vasili Arkhipov is 35 years old, appointed deputy commander of the Soviet Union's newest and most dangerous weapon, the K-19. And before Cuba, before the torpedo, before the moment that will define everything, the K-19 will teach him something that no military academy teaches, something you can only learn in the specific darkness of a machine that is trying to kill you from the inside. July 4, 1961. The North Atlantic, southeast of Greenland. The K-19 is the Soviet Union's first nuclear ballistic missile submarine, the crown jewel of Cold War engineering, the weapon that was supposed to make America blink. She carries ballistic missiles capable of reaching the eastern seaboard of the United States. She is the future, made of steel and uranium, and she is on her maiden voyage exercises. And then the cooling system fails. The reactor, the beating nuclear heart of the K-19, begins to overheat. The temperature climbs. The backup systems do not respond. Radio communications are damaged. There is no contact with Moscow. Captain Nikolai Zateyev faces the same impossible arithmetic that will haunt this story again and again. Without a functioning cooling system, the reactor overheats. The reactor overheats. The submarine becomes a nuclear disaster zone. The submarine becomes a nuclear disaster zone in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and the Americans, who have ships in the area, may interpret the explosion as an attack. He orders his 7 engineers into the reactor compartment. They know what this means. The radiation levels are lethal. Working in that space for the time required to build an emergency cooling system will expose them to doses that will kill them. Not immediately, but certainly. Within weeks. Within months. They go anyway. All 7 engineers and their officer die within a month. 15 more crew members die within 2 years. Every man on the K-19, including Vasili Arkhipov, absorbs enough radiation to write their future in invisible ink. A future that will arrive quietly years later in the form of cancers and organ failures and bodies that remember what the mind tries to forget. But in the moment, on July 4, 1961, Vasili Arkhipov does something that will prove more important than anyone realizes until it is almost too late. The crew is terrified. Some are talking about mutiny, about surfacing and signaling the Americans rather than dying in a Soviet reactor. The fear is rational. The impulse to survive is human. Arkhipov moves through the submarine, quietly, without speeches, without orders that feel like orders. He talks to men individually. He listens. He absorbs their fear without amplifying it. He backs Captain Zateyev not with blind obedience, but with calm argument. We can solve this. We have solved harder things. Hold the line a little longer. The mutiny does not happen. The engineers go into the reactor. The K-19 survives. And Vasili Arkhipov carries the radiation in his blood back to Olga and Yelena and the apartment near Moscow, where he says nothing about any of it because it is classified, because it is over, because some things you carry alone. He does not know yet that the radiation will kill him. The cancer is patient. It will wait 37 years. He does not know yet that in 14 months, in a different submarine, in warmer water, the world will give him one more impossible choice. October 1st, 1962. Kola Peninsula, Soviet Union. 4 Foxtrot-class submarines leave their base in Kola Bay, heading southwest. The mission is classified. The destination is the waters around Cuba. Each submarine carries 22 torpedoes, and one of those torpedoes on each vessel is nuclear. Roughly the same destructive power as the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. The authorization protocol for nuclear launch on most Soviet submarines requires 2 approvals, the captain and the political officer. On B-59, there is a 3rd requirement. Because Vasili Arkhipov is aboard as flotilla commander and chief of staff, his approval is also required. This is not a coincidence that history manufactured for drama. This is simply the chain of command. But it will become the most important bureaucratic detail of the 20th century. The flotilla crosses the Atlantic. The Americans are watching. U-2 spy planes have photographed Soviet missile installations being constructed in Cuba, and President Kennedy has announced a naval blockade. The world is holding its breath on the surface. 90 meters below the surface, the crew of B-59 does not know this. Their radio communications are intermittent. They are receiving fragments, civilian broadcasts, fragments of news. But the full picture is unavailable. Moscow has not made contact for days. On October 27th, later called Black Saturday, the most dangerous day of the entire Cold War, the USS Randolph aircraft carrier and 11 American destroyers locate B-59 off the coast of Cuba. The Americans do not know the submarine is nuclear armed. They are following standard protocol, dropping signaling depth charges, non-lethal, designed to force the vessel to surface for identification. Routine, measured. A naval procedure with a clear and unthreatening purpose. Inside B-59, they do not feel routine. They feel like bombs. The temperature is 60 degrees Celsius. The air conditioning has failed. Men are passing out from heat and carbon dioxide. The batteries are nearly dead, which means the submarine cannot maneuver, cannot dive deeper, cannot run. It is trapped. Captain Valentin Savitsky has been awake for how many hours he has stopped counting. He can hear the depth charges above him. He cannot reach Moscow. He cannot know whether war has begun on the surface while he is sealed in this steel tube 91 meters below it. He makes a decision. If we are going to die anyway, we will go down fighting. He orders the nuclear torpedo armed. The political officer, Ivan Maslenikov, agrees. 2 votes, yes and yes. 1 vote remains. The argument that happens next in the control room of B-59 is not recorded. No transcript exists. No audio survives. What we know comes from witnesses, men who were present, who remembered what they saw and heard, who carried the weight of it for 40 years before they were allowed to speak. Savitsky is shouting. The heat, the fear, the days of isolation and depth charges and silence from Moscow have compressed into a single certainty. They are under attack, the war has started, and he is the captain of a nuclear-armed vessel with the authority and the obligation to respond. Arkhipov does not shout back. This is perhaps the most important detail in the entire story. Because in a room full of terror and heat and certainty and noise, the man who is about to save the world speaks quietly. He tells Savitsky what he has worked out from the pattern of the depth charges, their timing, their intensity, their placement. These are not attack depth charges. They are signaling depth charges. The Americans are not trying to destroy B-59. They are trying to make it surface. He tells Savitsky that if a nuclear torpedo destroys the USS Randolph, if an American aircraft carrier vanishes in a nuclear flash 90 miles from the coast of Cuba, it does not matter whether Moscow has authorized it or not. America will respond. And the response will not be limited to one Soviet submarine. He tells Savitsky that the one thing they absolutely cannot do right now, the one thing that makes every other outcome worse, is fire. He speaks for perhaps 10 minutes. Savitsky listens. The torpedo is not launched. Instead, Arkhipov convinces Savitsky to send a single sonar ping, testing the American resolve, probing whether the destroyers above will interpret a signal as aggression. They do not. And slowly, painfully, with the battery nearly dead and men barely conscious from heat, B-59 rises toward the surface. It breaks through into the night air of the Caribbean. American searchlights find it immediately. American planes circle overhead, their lights blinding the Soviet sailors on the bridge. Arkhipov will write years later that one plane fired past the submarine. A warning shot, or a provocation, or a mistake. Nobody will ever fully agree on which. But the torpedo is not fired. The nuclear weapon that was supposed to destroy the USS Randolph and trigger a global thermonuclear exchange is lowered back into its housing and stays there. B-59 surfaces. The world does not end. The crew of B-59 returns to the Soviet Union. They are not welcomed as heroes. An admiral meets them at the dock with the specific contempt of a man who has decided that surfacing was a form of surrender. It would have been better if you had gone down with your ship. Vasili Arkhipov says nothing. He continues his career in the Soviet Navy with the same unhurried steadiness that has defined him since Staraya Kupovna. He commands submarines. He commands submarine squadrons. He is promoted to Rear Admiral in 1975. He becomes head of the Kirov Naval Academy. He is promoted to Vice Admiral in 1981. He retires in the mid-1980s and returns to Kupovna, the same small town outside Moscow where he was born, and lives quietly with Olga. He does not speak of B-59, not to his family, not to anyone. The mission is classified. The details are sealed. His daughter Yelena grows up knowing only that her father was a naval officer who served his country. She does not know that he saved it. In 1992, 30 years after Cuba, the story begins to surface. Former Soviet officers speak at conferences. Documents are declassified. The picture assembles itself piece by piece until it is undeniable. In 2002, at a conference in Havana marking the 40th anniversary of the Cuban Missile Crisis, Thomas Blanton of the U.S. National Security Archive stands up and says what the evidence has made inevitable. Vasili Arkhipov saved the world. Vasili Arkhipov is not in the room to hear it. He died on August 19, 1998 of kidney cancer. He was 72 years old. The cancer, doctors believe, was caused by the radiation he absorbed in the K-19 reactor compartment in 1961, the same accident that taught him how to hold a crew together when every instinct says to break. The K-19 gave him the cancer that killed him. The K-19 also gave him the calm that saved the world. He never received a medal for B-59. He never received a commendation, a ceremony, an official acknowledgement from the Soviet state that he had done something extraordinary on the night of October 27, 1962. In 2017, on the 55th anniversary of Black Saturday, the Future of Life Institute presents its inaugural Future of Life Award. The first recipient is Vasili Arkhipov. His daughter Yelena and his grandson Sergei accepted on his behalf. Yelena says her father never told her what happened on B-59 because it was classified. She learned the truth the same way the rest of the world did, from documents and conferences and the slow, uncomfortable process of history admitting what it preferred not to know. She says she is proud of him. She does not need to say it twice. Here is what the history books get wrong about Vasili Arkhipov. They call him a hero. They call him the man who saved the world. They give him awards, posthumously, and make documentaries, belatedly, and write his name in the margins of the Cold War history that almost didn't have a margin to write in. But heroism, in the way we usually mean it, implies a dramatic choice, a moment of glory, a man stepping forward into light. Vasili Arkhipov stepped into darkness. He said no in a room full of fear and heat and men who had already said yes. He said it quietly, without medals or orders or permission from Moscow. He said it in a steel tube 91 meters underwater, with depth charges falling above him and the batteries dying below him, and no way of knowing whether the world he was trying to protect still existed on the surface. He said it because he had worked out, with the specific calm of a man who has already survived one impossible situation by thinking rather than reacting, that the depth charges were a signal and not an attack, that the pattern of the explosions told a story different from the one fear was telling. He was right. And 8 billion people, the people alive today, the people who will be born tomorrow, every generation that follows, exist in the space that his no created. He went home to Olga and said nothing. He went to sleep and got up the next morning and continued being a naval officer and a husband and a father in a small town outside Moscow. He carried the radiation in his blood and said nothing about that either. Some men save the world loudly, with armies behind them and history writing their names while they are still alive to read it. Vasili Arkhipov saved it quietly, alone, in the dark, and then went home. The world never thanked him. It just kept existing, which is, if you think about it, the only thanks that matters.